All right, welcome back to WMMA Scene Now with your host Chuck Stevenson, and welcome to the second annual WMMA Scene Awards. We're going to recognize the significant achievements and accomplishments done throughout the year in the women's divisions. We're going to go over several categories, including Knockout of the Year, Submission of the Year, Breakout Fighter of the Year, the prospect to watch in the coming year, the Fight of the Year, and finally, the Fighter of the Year. Now, I searched high and low to come up with winners for each of these. They are my choice, although I did ask on various forums and social medias for nominations, and then I made my decision based on those and on my own research. Now, some channels I know focus mostly on the UFC, but I focus on the women's divisions as a whole, which means there might be some winners on here that you hadn't heard of or you might not have seen before. So I figure that as part of my goal is to, educate my audience and let them know that there is a world to the women's divisions besides just the UFC. So let's get down into the topics. First up, Knockout of the Year. So what makes a Knockout of the Year? Well, I have a couple factors that I look into. First up is devastating. How devastating was the knockout? I prefer that the fighter, the victim of the knockout, is completely out. If I can't find one like that, then we can go for really more of a TKO, but the more devastating the better. Second, significance. Okay, how significant was the fight in question? Was it a title fight? Was it a fight in a major organization? Was it a title fight in a major organization? Or was it just a fight that possibly was significant for that fighter at that time? And then finally, the fun factor. The more fun the knockout was, or just, the more exciting it was, the better. So, for this year's Knockout of the Year for 2020, the winner is going to be Bianca Antman, who KO'd Veer Nikkanen via high kick in the third round at Brave FC 37. So this ticks off a couple of the factors I looked for. First off, it was devastating. Nikkanen hit the floor. Antman followed up with one punch, but really that punch was not necessary before the referee stopped her. So this definitely hit the devastating factor. And plus, who doesn't love a good high kick KO? Second, significance. Well, this wasn't a major fight, and it wasn't in a major organization. However, it was significant to Bianca Antman in that it was her pro debut. So she made her pro debut knocking out a more experienced fighter. Also, no, never mind. Fun factor. Like I said, who does not love a good high kick knockout? I don't know anybody that doesn't like them. So, of course, a high kick KO is going to hit the fun factor there. So, congratulations to Bianca Antman. This is probably the one that nobody saw coming. The one award that probably nobody saw coming, other than the one person who nominated it. Okay, so next up we go into Submission of the Year. So, what factors do we look for in a Submission of the Year? Well, first off, rarity. How rare is the submission move in question? Go-go plata, you don't see every day. Flying triangle, you don't see every day. Arm bars, rear naked chokes, you see those all the time. They're a dime a dozen. So, rarity. Next up, same as in KO, significance. How significant was the fight in question? How was it a title fight? Was it in a big organization? Was there some real meaning behind the fight itself for that submission to make a big deal? Next, the strength of the submission. Was somebody choked unconscious? Were they hurt? Was there some devastating factor to it? That plays a big part. So, those are the three factors I looked for in the Submission of the Year. Now, before I get into the winner, I want to remind everyone that I'm recording this on January 1st, and I did this because MMA goes year-round all the way up to the final day of the year. That's why I didn't want to do this as soon as the UFC was done, because like I said, the women's divisions extend beyond the UFC. And I'm glad that I waited until January 1st. In this award, we have a two-way tie. First up, Vanessa Demopoulos defeated Sam Hughes via an inverted reverse triangle at LFA for the vacant LFA strawweight title fight. And then also, Ayaka Hamasaki defeated Miyu Yamamoto with a scissors choke, a leg scissors choke at Ryzen 26 just last night on New Year's Eve. Okay, both of these submissions ticked off several factors. First of all, the rarity. How often do you see an inverted reverse triangle? I can't remember seeing one in a fight before. How often do you see a leg scissors choke? Not very often for that either. So both of these ticked off the rarity factor. The significance factor. Both of these were for titles in their respective organizations. Demopoulos and Hughes fought for the vacant LFA strawweight title. Hamasaki and Yamamoto were fighting for the vacant Ryzen super atomweight title, which is probably the most significant title for its weight class in the world right now. So both of them ticked off the two most important factors. And then strength. You know, Hamasaki did not choke Yamamoto unconscious, but Demopoulos did. That's why I list that fight first over Hamasaki versus Yamamoto, because Sam Hughes went fully out. I mean, the referee, it was really more of a, a technical submission, because Sam Hughes didn't tap out, Yamamoto did. Sam Hughes went completely unconscious. So both of those meet the criteria for submission of the year. So congratulations to Vanessa Demopoulos and Ayaka Hamasaki. So moving along, we move into the Breakout Fighter of the Year for 2020. So what makes a breakout fighter? Well, it has to be a fighter who started out somewhat unheralded, maybe not fully unknown, but somewhat unheralded, and then just made a big splash during the year and kept going with that momentum forward. They had to become big news. They became a big fan favorite. Just basically someone that started out relatively unknown or mostly unknown. A lot of people were going, oh, well, who's this person? And then suddenly everybody knows their name. And for me, even though, and I'm showing my balance here because I don't even particularly care for this fighter, but there is no doubt in my mind that Amanda Hebas was the breakout fighter of 2020. She had that win over Mackenzie Dern in, October of 2019, and that's really what started to put her name on people's lips. But she basically took that momentum forward into 2020 and had a dominant win over Random Marcos. And I mean, nobody had dominated Random Marcos in a fight the way that Amanda Hebas had. And then she gets that first round submission over PVZ, who, while not one of the most widely liked fighters, is certainly one of the most widely known fighters in the UFC at the time. And that just made Amanda Hebas a media darling, a social media darling, a fan darling. Everybody was talking about her, especially after that win over Paige Van Zandt. So Amanda Hebas, without a doubt, is the breakout fighter of the year. Now, she is currently scheduled to face Marina Rodriguez, the first ranked fighter that she will be fighting. So we'll have to see if she can carry that momentum further into 2021. Okay, so next up is going to be the prospect to watch in 2021. So what do I look for in a prospect to watch? Well, first off, how well did they do in the previous year? A prospect doesn't just come out of nowhere. They have to start doing well in their career in order to become a prospect. Basically, they have to become a prospect first before they become a prospect to watch. So how well they did in the previous year. Next up, the potential to do big things in the coming year. I mean, are they likely to do big things in the coming year? That's what I'm looking for. And then finally, poised to become possibly the next breakout fighter. So the prospect to watch could easily become the breakout fighter for the next year. So I thought long and hard about this, prospects to watch. There are a lot of really good prospects to watch in WMMA right now. But for me, this one, and this one's coming out of left field probably for most of you, but the prospect to watch in 2021 is none other than Deep Jewel's own Seika Izawa. So Izawa made her debut as late as October 31st at Deep Jewel's 30, defeating the much more experienced Mika Arai by dominant decision. And I mean, she just controlled Mika Arai from bell to bell. Huge, significant win in her pro debut. I mean, Izawa was basically set up to be a bounce back fighter for Mika Arai, who had just come off of a bad win, like up 2 weight classes. So Izawa comes in, nobody's given her a chance to win this fight, and she comes out and dominates her much more experienced opponent. Arai had 8 fights to her name at that time when Izawa made her pro debut against her, and Izawa came out and just dominated her. Then, less than 2 months later, on December 19th at Deep Jewel's 31, she faces the current Deep Jewel's strawweight champion, Miki Motono, in a non-title fight. And she defeats Motono in only her second fight. Again, another much more experienced opponent, in a champion nonetheless, granted a non-title fight, but she defeats a sitting champion in only her second fight. Now, she also has the chance to become a breakout fighter because the fight against Motono, there is a stipulation that had she won, she would get an immediate rematch for the title against Motono, and she's going to take that. So, she did very well in the previous year. She has the potential to do big things in the coming year and possibly even become the next big breakout fighter. And that's just in her first two fights. First 2 fights. Brand new fighter, already a significant prospect to keep an eye on in 2021. So now we move into the first of our final 2 categories, which is going to be the fight of the year. So what am I looking for when I talk about fight of the year? Well, first of all, a drawn out fight that's going to go on longer is going to, bump it up farther than, a fight with a fast finish. Now, that's not to say that an early finish, can't win fight of the year if it was a really fun, like, fast-paced fight before that. But, I mean, if it's like an early KO or submission, it's not likely going to win fight of the year. Because, a fight that goes on longer is going to be more memorable. And also, we look for back and forth action, not a lot of feeling out, not a lot of breaks in the action. We look for, like non-stop action. The more non-stop action, the better the fight is. Also, excitement after the fight is a significant factor. How much are people talking about the fight after it goes on? And how long are they talking about the fight? If a fight goes on and by the very next fight in that same event, people have moved on, it wasn't that good. It must not have been that good of a fight. But if people are talking about it, in the weeks and months after that, that's huge, which goes into longevity and memory. You gotta remember, a fight could happen on technically January 1st, and it's gonna go against fights that happen as late as December 31st that same year. So longevity and memory is very huge in winning fight of the year. If you have a fight that's only remembered for a week or 2, it's just probably not fight of the year necessarily. But longevity and memory serves very well to win this one. Now, the fight that won this one is probably the first in everyone's, memory and everyone's head. And I was tempted to do something different, just to do something different, but I decided, I'm not a hipster like that. So the fight of the year is none other than Zhang Weili versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk from UFC 248 Adesanya Romero. This fight had everything. It had high-level skill. The striking in this fight was off the charts, not just for a women's fight, but for mixed martial arts fight, period. Also, it was drawn out. It went to a split decision, very close split decision, could have gone either way. It was back and forth as well. It was almost non-stop action. Now, there was a little bit of a feeling out process in the first round, but once they got going, they did not stop. These two ladies just went at each other for 5 rounds. Excitement after the fight. Man, I'll tell you what. Adesanya and Romero were the main event, and Jędrzejczyk and Zhang were the co-main event. There was almost no way that Adesanya and Romero were going to live up to the co-main event, and man, they didn't even come close. The excitement after this fight was so great, it basically made the pay-per-view because the main event ended up being a stinker. And there was just a lot of excitement for like weeks and even months afterwards. And then finally, longevity in memory. This fight happened on March 7th, and people are still talking about it now. So, there was almost no doubt, even back in March, and it never wavered, that this was going to be the women's fight of the year. This fight just had it all. It was that good of a fight. Probably, it's one of the best women's fights ever. I don't know if it is the best, but it is definitely up there with them. Now, I do want to give an honorable mention to a fight that could have easily won had it not happened to have occurred the very night before. On March 6th, on Invicta Phoenix Series 3, the main event between Yulia Stoliarenko and Elisa Verzosa was a hilariously fun fight and one of the bloodiest fights in women's mixed martial arts history. This fight was non-stop action from bell to bell as well. I feel bad for these two ladies because it just happened to be at the worst time possible, the night before Zhang versus Jędrzejczyk. So honorable mention to Stoliarenko versus Verzosa. Now in our final category, we're going to the fighter of the year. So what makes a fighter of the year for the WMMA Scene Awards? Well, this should go without saying, but sometimes you just have to make the clarification anyway. Obviously, it has to be a female fighter. We're talking about women's mixed martial arts, so it has to be a female fighter. Next up, the fighter doesn't have to have a perfect record, but they do certainly need to do something to make up for any losses that they had. Whether the fights before that were so good, before the loss, or whether they came back after that loss and had some really good fights. Also, finishes help. You don't have to be a great finisher, but they certainly don't hurt either. Significance of wins. The more significant your wins, the higher your chances are of winning. And then finally, my preference, more than anything else, comes first. I like to remind people that I'm a fan first. Yes, I do have my own channel. I am a commentator. But I'm also a fan first. So if there are several close ones, I'm probably going to pick the fighter that I like more. Now, I had to think really hard on this one because to me, there just wasn't any fighter that stood out more than any other. We had some championship defenses. We had some championships won. We had some really good fights throughout the year, and we had some fighters that did a lot of good things, but not necessarily great. But to me, nothing really stood out. So I had to really think. And, I came up with something. What was more significant in everyone's lives than anything else in 2019, including in the world of mixed martial arts? COVID-19. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. COVID seriously affected the sport, shut down the sport almost completely. Even the UFC was down for like 2 months. So I had to really think, how does this relate? Well, there were a lot of fights canceled and a lot of fights that were saved by people who stepped up and took fights on short notice. So for 2020 Fighter of the Year, I've not awarded it to one person. I've awarded it to a lot of people. The 2020 Fighter of the Year are the short notice warriors. This award goes out to any fighter that stepped up on a month or less to fight. If you stepped up on a month or less to fight, especially if you stepped up on like say 2 weeks or less, then you are the very definition of a short notice warrior. And if you helped save a fight and helped, prevent more fighters, from losing their paycheck and getting your own paycheck as well, then congratulations, you are a short notice warrior and you are the Fighter of the Year. Now some people are going to say, oh, you just copped out. Well, okay, that's your opinion. But to me, the short notice warriors stood out more than anything else to me this year. More than any one fighter's title fights, more than any one fighter's wins or losses, more than just about anything else, this year was significantly helped along by the short notice warriors who stepped up on short notice to take fights, save events. The short notice warriors, they helped to save MMA this year. And that's why the short notice warriors are the Fighter of the Year, or Fighters of the Year. So congratulations to all of the short notice warriors out there. All right, so that is it for the second annual WMMA Scene Awards. So, what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. In the meantime, if you liked the video, please give it a like. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe to WMMA Scene Now, the most complete women's mixed martial arts dedicated platform on YouTube. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.